Hello and welcome to another one of D's ADD videos. Today we're going to be looking at some advanced examples of significant figures. Use your order of operations, so work inside the parentheses here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 sig figs. But what do? We look at actually the number after the decimal when we're adding and subtracting. If you were to distribute, then you would do 4 and 2 and pick the least number of sig figs. And then 3 and 2, so both of those would have 2. But since I said order of operations first, let's look at this subtraction problem. The rule for subtraction is look at the numbers after the decimal point, and after you look at those, compare and see which one has the least, and that's how many your answer should have. So when you look here, you have 3 after the decimal point. Here we have 2, so your answer, when you subtract those two, should have 2 places after the decimal point, and you should round as such. So if we do that, 3.251 minus, hopefully you've tried this problem on your own prior to listening to the solution. So if we were to do that without any rounding, that would be 2.171 centimeters. But remember, 2 is the least number of decimals that we have after comparing these two. So this one right here should be rounded to 2. So since the number after the 2 determines whether if we round up or not, this number's 4 or less, it stays the same as happens here. Had it been 5 or greater, we would have switched this to an 8. But now we have 2.18 centimeters times 2.1 centimeters. So the rule here for the multiplication of two terms is you choose the one with the least sig figs. This has 2 non-zero sig figs. This has 3. So if I were to take 2.18 times 2.1, that would give me 4.578. Oops. Let's go back to red. So if I have 4.578, that's way too many sig figs. And this 10 is still at the bottom. I'm just doing the numerator right now. So what do I have to do? Well, I have to change that into 2 sig figs. So if I look at the number after the second sig fig, which is this 7, that's greater than 5, so I changed this 5 to a 6. So it becomes 4.6 centimeters squared. Oops, sorry about that. And then we have 10 centimeters on the bottom, can't forget about that. Centimeters squared cancels with centimeters, and we're going to get 0.46 centimeters. We're not done though, because in division you choose the least number of sig figs. This has 2, and at first glance you might think this has 2 as well, but remember, trailing zeros without a decimal point are not significant. So this has 1 sig fig. So our answer should only have 1 sig fig, so we have 0.5 centimeters. You might be inquiring about this 0. Remember, to the left of the decimal point, they are not significant. Or to the left of the first non-zero term. Okay, that's the first one knocked down. Let's look at this next one here. We have a subtraction and then a division. So if I were to subtract these two, I look at the sig figs, and the sig figs on the first term is 3. That 0 counts because of the decimal, and it's trailing to the right. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sig figs. Okay. Now, if we're doing subtraction, what do we have to do? We have to look at the number of after the decimal. So this would be 3 of them on this numerator here. after the decimal, and this one has 2. And what do we do with that? Well, we now know that our answer should have only 2 numbers after the decimal point because of these yellow digits. Again, looking at the numbers after the decimal. So at this point, subtract. So we got 2.235 minus 1.20 equals 1.035 feet. Oops, let's do that in red. Now, we only want 2 spaces after the decimal. So when we look at this number here, we see that it's a 5. So this needs to now become a 4. So it becomes 1.04 feet in the numerator. Now looking at the denominator, again, same scenario. And when we subtract these 2, we're going to get 2. Oh, sorry. Been making too many videos today. Let's try that again. 1.0 seconds squared. Now, if we look at the number of spots past the decimal, that's going to be 2 here. That's going to be 1. So this should only have 1, but since it's 1.00, it doesn't really matter in the sense of values, but it does matter in the sense of sig figs. So, sorry, I'm being distracted by my puppies. So we need 1.0 there. So let me go back to red. So this becomes 1.0 seconds squared. Then you put it in the denominator. At this point, you divide the 2, and when you divide the 2, anything divided by 1 is itself, but here we now have comparison of 2 sig figs in the denominator and 3 in the numerator. So you divide the 2, and after you divide the 2, you end up with 1.04 feet per second squared. But we have to only have 2 sig figs. That's a 4, so it becomes 1.0 feet per second squared. Okay, so compare the numbers after the decimal for the subtractions, and then when you divide, make sure you account for the sig figs. I almost made the mistake of saying it doesn't matter here, but it does, right? Because it gives us 2 sig figs versus 3 sig figs, which I guess it wouldn't be that big a difference, but you never know what degree of accuracy you actually need. So that's basically it for the more advanced examples. Practice, practice, practice. I hope I've cleared up some confusion for you. Thank you and have a nice day.